the YouTube gets linked up. And really amazing, but this is episode number 24, if you can believe that we've been doing this now for 24 weeks straight. And right after, looks like we are all set. Hi, Marcia. Welcome. Tom, Joseph, Angela, Patty. All right, we have a bunch of people coming in, and welcome to those people who actually haven't been on. I posted this episode 24 on the internet, so you know, on different platforms, and so it looks like we have some additional people coming in. If you don't know who I am, my name is Dr. Jonathan Carp, and for the purposes of this lecture, I am actually a board-certified dermatologist since the year 2000, and really remarkable given that that the topic of tonight is really how to get glowing skin, how to understand skin health, and it took me 24 weeks to get there. And the truth is that I still practice as a dermatologist. I'm also, for people who are new, a president and founder of Miracle Noodle, which is a zero-calorie noodle, and also have an interest in being, I do health coaching, and I've done some training with the Institute for Functional Medicine. So I help people with incorporating lifestyle strategies into their lives to reverse various conditions. And of course, but still, skin is my first love in terms of postgraduate training. After 4 years of medical school and a year of internship, spent 3 years doing dermatology, and still is really what I love to do the most of just about everything. So it's a little bit unusual that it took actually this long to get to the topic of skin. So let me share my screen and we'll get started. There's certainly a lot to go over. And I often think with these lectures that what's really amazing about it is that in a sense, I'm actually really covering things maybe for people who are watching, it doesn't feel superficial. It certainly shouldn't. But when you really have certainly a deep understanding of these things, a lot of what we're talking about is very superficial, but covering a fair amount of information. And it's really remarkable because you can go deeper and deeper, and there's so much knowledge to be gained that it's really incredibly remarkable. And I see we have some people calling in. There's someone calling in from the 713 area code. Welcome. Okay, so tonight we're talking about how to get healthy, glowing skin, and we're going to review essentially what are the things that interact with the skin and affect whether or not you're going to have healthy skin. And we're starting off with blood sugar, moving over to the gut microbiome as well as the skin microbiome, talking a little bit about hormonal effects, nutritional deficiencies, how to boost the skin barrier, and how to avoid environmental damage. So, because quite frankly, you know, your skin is really a remarkable organ, and you really have to think of it as an integrated organ, meaning that it's one big organ that is responsible for keeping your fluid in, maintaining your temperature, you know, acting as a barrier from the outside, protecting you. It's an immune, very, very immune reactive organ, and it also is a hormonal organ as well. It actually has hormonal effects that can go throughout the entire body, believe it or not. So it's a very incredible thing, and when you learn about skin, the detail is so remarkable that there's so many. You think it's just skin, and you know the skin has multiple layers, but what is amazing is that there are so many different layers, but there's also what is called skin appendages. So things like sweat ducts and hair follicles, and associated with the sweat ducts and the hair follicles and the oil glands, all of these things have so many potential things that can go wrong that it's just studying the anatomy of skin is you realize how miraculous the human body is. I remember in medical school, just when we would when we did the dissection of the, gross anatomy and dissection of the body, there were so many moments during that class, and that's one of the first classes that you take, where you just look and there's just a sense of miraculousness and marvel when you look at the body. It's just the most incredible thing. And as you go deeper and deeper and more microscopic into it, it's amazing. It's just so amazing. It's so miraculous to see the detail and how everything works together, that you come away with that just thinking that the fact that everything runs the way it does the majority of the time in a healthy way is, again, almost miraculous. And it's you can do this with every organ in the body, but the skin happens to be particularly really rich in all kinds of things that can go wrong. It's really a remarkable thing. So as I said, let's jump right into it. Some of the very beginning is going to be a repeat because we've discussed this before in other episodes. And nonetheless, I think it's important to, if you want healthy, glowing skin, that you have an understanding of these, because we want to look good. We want to have a skin as an organ that protects us, keeps us young, keeps everything else healthy. And to do that, we have to really look at our bodies internally out and then externally in. And the fact is that for healthy, glowing skin, ultimately, if you are not internally healthy, outwardly, you're not going to be healthy. In fact, sometimes the skin is really a window to what's going on the inside. And that's one of the reasons why dermatology really appealed to me during medical school, because you could pick up, early diabetes and various internal cancers sometimes have certain things that show on the outer. Nutritional deficiencies can show. There's so many things that you can pick up when you're very, very attuned to looking at the skin and examining the skin. And it's one of the reasons that really appealed to me during my training. So let's jump into blood sugar, because it's quite important to understand what that has to do with the skin. Now, we all know, because if you've been on my classes and episodes before, we've spoken about how if your blood sugar is going up and down, you're going to be aging faster. And the reason that we age faster is because of something called AGEs, called advanced glycation end products, which is basically where sugar binds to protein. And it's like if you get hemoglobin A1C, that is a very frequent measurement that we get for diabetes, but it basically shows sugar binding to protein. Now, in the skin, what happens is when the sugar binds to the collagen, which is the primary protein in the skin, you get this binding of the sugar to the collagen, which weakens the collagen and leads to wrinkling and aging. And so when you get these spikes of blood sugar, that is going to really cause a great deal of wrinkling and aging. So we need to be careful about our sugar intake. We need to be careful about our refined grains. Any grains that have been finely milled into a fine flour is going to make your blood sugar rise. And that's why people see a fairly good benefit when they go on sugar-free and grain-free diets, because you're reducing generally the amount of these AGEs. By the way, since we have some people that are new, if you have any questions, just type them into the chat box. And as always, interaction is always great. Next, with blood sugar, so now we understand, and you probably have heard me say this many, many times in regards to blood sugar, but it is important in terms of general aging for you to make sure that your blood sugar is under control. And in fact, many anti-aging experts really say that the number one way to minimize aging is to maintain healthy blood sugar. And many of these authorities are actually, even if they're not diabetic, do for several weeks, they wear a portable glucometer to measure their blood sugar, because everyone has varying reactions to different things during the day. And they feel that for each of us, we should have an understanding of what makes our blood sugar rise and spike so that we can control it to reduce the rapidity of aging. Because when you get this binding of sugar to protein, when you get that in your tendons, you get stiffer. And so when it happens in your eyes, you can get retinopathy and all kinds of different problems. So it's very important to take care of our blood sugar when it comes to getting healthy, glowing skin. Additionally, we get an elevation of something called IGF-1, which is associated in studies with acne. And when you reduce IGF-1, which is really raised by blood sugar as well as animal protein, but in acne, generally it's blood sugar. When you can put people on a low glycemic diet where their blood sugar is more rapid, I should say, effectively controlled, and is not spiking up and down, then you're going to get an improvement. Most of the time, you get an improvement in acne. So let's move on to the microbiome. And by the way, next week we'll be talking about IGF-1 a little bit, because next week we'll be talking a little bit about 5 specific anti-aging strategies, general anti-aging strategies. So let's talk a little bit about the microbiome. Well, the microbiome is, of course, many of you know, a combination of mostly bacteria, but also viruses and fungi that live within our guts. That's generally what most people think of when they think of the microbiome. But the skin has its own microbiome. In other words, your skin has natural bacteria and viruses that live on the skin, and parasites as well, that live on the skin naturally, believe it or not. And when you get a disruption of that microbiome, which is called dysbiosis, then that can lead to a whole host of problems. And a lot of times people, in their rush to sort of sterilize things and use antibacterial soaps and scrub their skin from head to toe, can cause damage to their skin microbiome, which can result in less healthy skin. Now, what does less healthy skin mean? It basically means that the primary functions of your skin, which are to act as a barrier against the outside and to process immunologically the outside, as well as a host of other things, regulating body temperature as well. When the microbiome, the skin microbiome, when there's dysbiosis or alteration of the bacteria in your skin, you're going to have essentially a weaker skin to not be able to handle what it's supposed to do. And that's not going to be obviously good for overall health. So let's talk a little bit about just the skin microbiome and what it does. Well, it prevents colonization of other microorganisms. So when you think about, have a soil as an example, when you have like very healthy soil, it's a combination of fungi and viruses and bacteria. But if one grows too much, then the soil isn't as healthy as it used to be. And you can think of, algae blooms in the ocean where, everything is in a natural homeostasis. And then all of a sudden something happens and one thing starts to overgrow. Well, that's usually held in check by things. But when your skin microbiome is disrupted, other microorganisms can grow that shouldn't be there, which can lead to a host of problems. One, of course, being infection. Interestingly, it remains stable throughout your life. It's almost like a fingerprint. Your microbiome is going to be different from another person's microbiome, and in fact is relatively stable throughout your life if you're healthy. And it also has important roles in your immune system, as we discussed. So the reason is because there is an incredible link between the bacteria on your skin and your skin's ability to process the immunological threats that it gets from outside, because our skin is what we present to the world. And it's what protects us from the outside of the world. And we don't want to over-sterilize this skin in such a way or damage it in any way. And we'll get into more about the skin barrier later tonight. But when you don't want to damage that, and you certainly don't want to damage it by damaging the microbiome. A lot of people don't realize how important this is because, quite frankly, the science is relatively new. We don't know all that much about the skin microbiome, except for the fact that we do know its major roles and that it's associated with various diseases as well. Now, obviously, acne is a multifactorial disease that is related to androgens, to hormones, as well as diet, as we spoke about. But the diet link has something to do with hormones as well. But also there's bacteria on the skin, and that there is skin dysbiosis when people have acne. Eczema can be made worse by staph, and it has actually been shown that people who have eczema who get secondary infections with eczema actually have decreased diversity of their skin biome. And remarkably, they actually had one study where they were able to link that decreased diversity, meaning, the more we've spoken about this in other episodes, where the gut microbiome, the more diverse it is, the healthier our gut microbiome is. Well, the same thing goes with the skin microbiome. The skin microbiome should have wide diversity. And we'll get into various things about that later on. But basically, decreased diversity has been shown in people with eczema, and they've actually been able to link it to their immediate surroundings. And that's important because we don't want to, as I said, over-sterilize ourselves. It's important to get out and to interact with the world, to walk on the beach and do gardening and pet your dog, and all of these things have been associated with increased diversity in the gut as well as the skin. And it is, in some ways, we are united and linked with our environments in so many deep ways that we don't even understand them yet. Case in point, things like how important it is to get natural sunlight into our eyes to reset our circadian rhythms. But also, it can be possible, and is for sure related, the fact that our gut microbiome as well as our skin microbiome is uniquely influenced by our environmental influences, such that they're going to yield greater health for us if there's increased diversity. So don't over-sterilize your body. You don't need antibacterial soaps. There are reasons for short-term uses of that, obviously, but generally speaking, you don't want to do that. You don't need to scrub your skin from head to toe. We are not like we used to be, 200 years ago working in the fields. We don't need soap and scrub all over our body, because when we suds and scrub our body, that's going to decrease the skin microbiome. And we'll get into a little bit of that later, but suffice it to say for now, you do not need to soap your body from head to toe. I know I always get a lot of looks from my patients when I tell them that, but there is no reason for you to soap and scrub every part of your body unless you have, actual dirt on your skin, under your arms, breasts, groin, face and neck, these areas that, feet, obviously, these sorts of places that can build up stuff. Then you use a mild soap there. We'll get into a little bit more about that later on. Wound healing, also, sterility can actually harm wound healing. Wounds that are overly sterilized have decreased wound healing. Also, abnormal sugar levels, which we discussed, associated with infections. And on wounds, you can get what are called biofilms. Biofilms can also be found in other skin conditions, where you basically get a film of bacteria and yeast sometimes that are very difficult to get through. But all of these things have more of a potential to be a problem if you have skin dysbiosis. And you want to make sure, as I said, that the way you preserve that is, you don't overly sterilize, you don't overly scrub, you get out into nature. All of these things are going to increase the biodiversity of your skin. I just have a reference here because I had a few people ask me to just include some references for further reading. And this was something that was quite a good article. There's also something called the gut-skin axis. And remarkably, by actually eating various probiotics, you can actually get a very good effect on the skin. And there are various lactobacillus species specifically that show an effect on acne, psoriasis, improving the barrier function of your skin hydration, less wrinkles, all of these things. And they have some really remarkable studies. There's one lactobacillus called reuteri, which has actually been shown to increase dermal thickness, which is going to reduce wrinkles. And there's a doctor by the name of William Davis, who wrote that book, Wheat Belly, who actually has a whole community of people who make L. reuteri yogurt at home. And it's really remarkable that a lot of the people report back that after they start eating Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt that they make at home, that they have a reduced they have reduced wrinkling. And actually, I've tried to make that yogurt. I've had a couple, as many of you know, I do all kinds of sort of home experiments with food and fermentation and growing and such. And I've tried to do the L. reuteri, and I did have one batch, but unfortunately I didn't have time to do another batch after that. And so I can't personally report, but of all the people that do it online, of course, this is completely anecdotal with no background. I believe that the initial L. reuteri studies for increasing dermal collagen were done on mice, but in this group of his patients and followers, the majority of them report a good reduction in wrinkling. And you can just Google L. reuteri yogurt, and you can get the recipe and try to do that on your own. It's sort of an interesting thing. Okay, now, the boosting the skin barrier down here is really where we're going to get into practical suggestions. So we will have many practical suggestions as we go through. Hormonal effects, of course, sebaceous glands, which are related to acne, oiliness, related to androgens, hormonal, temperature regulation. You get increases in temperature during your menstrual cycle, and of course, thyroid can cause pale, dry skin. Just to show that there are hormonal effects. Very, very superficial introduction to that topic. Nutritional deficiencies and imbalances, brittle hair and nails. You can take biotin, or it could be a biotin deficiency. We don't recommend biotin supplementation as much as we used to anymore because it can interfere with certain blood work. One scary one being that if you're having a heart attack, if you're taking high doses of biotin, it could show that you're not having it. The lab test could be inaccurate if you're having a heart issue. But biotin can be found in yolks, egg yolks, organ meats, nuts, seeds, cruciferous vegetables, ulcers, rash in the corner of the mouth, B vitamins, especially riboflavin, bruising can be related to vitamin C. Dandruff or seborrheic dermatitis is a tricky one. The data is really not completely clear, but it is a type of yeast that grows on the skin usually. And so therefore sugar probably has a role in that, and B vitamins may as well. Hair loss is complicated and probably a whole lecture unto itself. We'll talk a little bit about essential fatty acids down here when we get into boosting the skin barrier. Vitamin E, mixed tocotrienols can be helpful, zinc, niacin, all of these can be helpful with hair loss. But hair loss, again, is a topic all unto itself. There's many kinds of hair loss, and it's a complicated topic. Keratosis pilaris, which is like the bumpy skin on the back of the arms, sometimes the thighs and cheeks, is pretty much the same suggestions as eczema, which is basically correcting your essential fatty acids, moisturizing your skin properly, being on an anti-inflammatory diet. There's a whole host of suggestions there. But the main topic tonight, which I mentioned, was how to get healthy, glowing skin. And we'll really get more into it in the next two sections of tonight's lecture. So let's talk a little bit about boosting the skin barrier as what's called a stratum corneum, which is the dead layer of skin at the top. And then we have the epidermis, and then we have underneath of that, the dermis. And inside the dermis is basically your collagen. It's what sort of bulks the skin up. And like when you see a baby, as an example, baby has that sort of thick, skin, pinchable skin, blubber-like skin. That's a thick dermis. And when you're born, you have this remarkably thick dermis. And as you get older, with sun and age and poor blood sugar control and all of these things, not only does the dermis slowly shrink, but the collagen starts to become weaker. And when that happens, you're going to get wrinkling and you're going to get bruising, as an example. A lot of people come in and, they have, as they get older, they get bruising on the arms, and some of that can be just from sun, believe it or not, can cause the capillaries to actually break. But really what's happening there is that you're getting this, there was always a barrier between the blood vessels, which were sort of under the dermis, and the epidermis at the top. And as that dermis shrinks, the blood vessels are now sort of right up against the top layer of skin, and just a little bump is going to cause that to break, and you can get these bruises. So we have, what causes glowing skin? Well, if we have too much of this stratum corneum, that dead layer of skin that acts as protection, then that can cause the skin to look dull and pale. Additionally, you have underneath of the epidermis, the dermis, and we want to have youthful collagen. We want to have that thick collagen there for there to be that young looking skin. And we want to make sure that the barrier function of the skin is also working, because there's a oil barrier that acts to protect our skin. We all have this natural oil layer that is on top of our skin, and that also contributes to the health of the skin. So now we are thinking about three things. We have the dull layer of dead, dry skin. We don't want to be too much. We have the oil barrier of the skin. We want to be able to replenish that so that the skin is moist and isn't dry, as well as acts to prevent water loss. It's called transepidermal water loss. We don't want our body to be leaking water. So we want to have this oil barrier in place. So that's number two. And then the dermis. We want the dermis to be filled with water, filled with collagen, and the combination of all three of these things is going to lead to healthy, glowing skin. And I'm breaking this down. Let me close this so I don't scare you about everything we're going to talk about here. So the first is what are called ceramides. Now, ceramides are, many of you may be familiar with ceramides now, because there are a lot of over-the-counter moisturizers that have ceramides in them. There's one called CeraVe, which is named that because it has a certain number of ceramides in it. And there are many other particular creams out there. I don't want to get too much into any sort of brand names or recommendations of specific brands, but needless to say, there are now many, many moisturizers out there that have ceramides in them. Now, ceramides are a natural part of the moisture oil barrier, essentially, of your skin. So if you can improve the ceramides, either by externally adding them or taking things that increase production of ceramides, then you're going to get a benefit to the look of your skin and the health of your skin. So what's remarkable and, of course, obvious about skin is that you can apply medicines directly to it, which makes the field of dermatology so remarkable, because you can do all kinds of studies, because you don't have to worry so much about the side effects happening internally. You can try all kinds of topical things. And as a result, we have all kinds of things that you can apply to your skin that have very good data on what they might do. Now, obviously, it's very easy to use a moisturizer with a ceramide in it. And I recommend, actually, that everyone does use a moisturizer with a ceramide in it. And there are many, many brands that you can that are out there, even at your local Walgreens or CVS. Vitamin C and nicotinamide both upregulate the production of ceramides. Now, many of you know, because vitamin C almost comes up in every episode that we've spoken about, that I recommend everyone take vitamin C supplementally. My policy, I guess you could say, when it comes to vitamins is that you should have a good reason why you're taking each and every vitamin. But when it comes to vitamin C, I think everyone should be taking at least a small dose of vitamin C per day. Now, as I just mentioned, you can apply vitamin C to the skin, and we'll get into a little bit of that a little bit later. But I also recommend that a good antioxidant be used on the skin, and vitamin C is what I recommend. There's some very good topical vitamin Cs out there, and should be part of any anti-aging skin regimen that there is. Niacinamide or nicotinamide, both of these are pretty much the same thing. Niacinamide, generally you see added to creams, and it's also a very effective thing at reducing redness. It's also added to some acne medicines, and will upregulate ceramides in addition to having a net anti-inflammatory effect to help with skin redness. Nicotinamide, again, these are the same, is usually referred to as an oral medicine. This is a form of vitamin B3. And for people who have a lot of what are called precancers, they go in there and they get sprayed, or they have non-melanoma skin cancers, believe it or not, there was an amazing study in the New England Journal of Medicine probably 5 or 6 years ago that showed that taking nicotinamide 500 milligrams twice a day can actually reduce the incidence of non-melanoma skin cancer by a very significant rate. So, as well as precancers. So all of my skin cancer patients and precancer patients, the ones that come in that have to get treated quite a bit, I tell them to use nicotinamide by mouth twice a day, almost for everyone that comes in. Make sure it's sensitive, so make sure it's light protected and not old in the jar that it is, but most of the time it is, so that's not an issue. And what's quite interesting is that nicotinamide, the pills, are often combined with something called fern extract, and that can actually boost the sun resistance of your skin. But we'll get into that just a little bit. Hyaluronic acid is also something that can pull water into the skin and plump up the skin. So that's why hyaluronic acid is a very common thing to be found in skin creams. It also has been tested by mouth, believe it or not, and you actually do get some, boosting of the skin with that as well. Let's talk a little bit about essential fatty acids. Now, I spoke to you about 3 things, right? We spoke about getting the outer layer of the dead skin to be reduced a little bit, the oil barrier of the skin, and the dermis, the plumpness of the skin. Well, essential fatty acids, which are basically needed for your body, is going to be one of the main components of the oil barrier of your skin. Now, you'll find what's called linoleic acid, which is an omega-6 fatty acid. And this omega-6 fatty acid is really critical for your skin, which means that you often will find various plant oils that are put into cosmeceuticals, creams and oils and such that are meant to prevent and reduce the signs of aging in your skin. Now, just as linoleic acid is important for you for these things to work, it's also important for you to be eating these in their right fashion. Now, I've spoken about this in multiple other episodes of our class, and that is that a lot of us are eating too many omega-6s in reference to omega-3s. Omega-3s, of course, we all know: fish oil, walnuts, flax, etc. Linoleic acid is an omega-6 fatty acid, and it's found in nuts and seeds. So it's very important for everyone. Most of the omega-6s that we eat these days are rancid. So vegetable oils, sunflower oil, all of these, if they're not prepared properly, and most of the edible vegetable oils are actually rancid. So you want to avoid getting rancid omega-6 or linoleic acid. You want to get it in its purest form. So it's very important for you to eat a handful of raw nuts and seeds per day. And that will give you enough of the beneficial linoleic acid that's going to help your skin. Because again, we don't want to, as I sometimes use an analogy, if you're putting a brick into a wall, to to make a stable wall, you're going to need it to be in its pure form. It's non-oxidized and pure form. And if you're eating fried foods that are fried in vegetable oil and using rancid, corn and safflower oil in your cooking, then you're not going to be getting that pure brick. It's going to be a faulty brick, and the entire wall is not going to be strong enough. So a handful of soaked raw nuts and seeds per day is really the way to go to get essential fatty acids. Can you take an essential fatty acid supplement? You could, although some of those have their issues. So sometimes I do recommend people take a tablespoon of hemp seed oil per day, because it has a very good ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids. So you get all of your essential fatty acids as sort of like a supplement. And I recommend that you buy one that's in the refrigerated oil section of say, Whole Foods. And if it's not, and it's in a sealed container, make sure it's light protected. And when you open it, you store it in the refrigerator and you use it. If you don't want to have a handful of raw nuts and seeds per day, then hemp seed oil is a very good supplement to take by mouth. And you can mix it with olive oil for a salad. It's, it has a very nutty flavor. Next is antioxidants. So polypodium, which is that fern extract, is often done in combination with nicotinamide. There are several supplements you can buy that have both of these. So what's the effect? The effect of the nicotinamide, as I said, is to reduce the incidence of skin cancer, but it also enhances your DNA repair. That's sort of partially how it works. And there are many companies that are combining these two together into a supplement that you can take. As I said, nicotinamide will also reduce redness of the skin, and the polypodium is going to make your skin have an SPF. Now, it's obviously not meant to be used for primary sun protection. We'll get into that when we speak about sunblocks. But if you have had a lot of sun exposure and you continue to get a lot of sun exposure, whether that's from work-related conditions or whatever the case, or some sort of sports, then you're not going to get as much sun damage if you take polypodium on a daily basis, because, as I said, it boosts your skin's natural SPF protection. It's really remarkable. And there's also some citrus extracts that are sometimes used in some of these supplements that can boost it just a little bit more. But the main really pretty remarkable studies are with polypodium, and they're pretty darn good. When it comes to antioxidants and aging, as I said, a very good topical vitamin C daily is really going to be good for overall anti-aging. Now, there are many, many different antioxidants for the skin. I've only listed two. If you look at there's one dermatology journal, and there's a cosmeceutical review every week with yet another plant-derived extract that has antioxidant effects. So this could be, a month-long series on the topicals that have been studied, because, as I said before, it's so easy to study these things and to see some effect. And just about any plant-based pure extract that the plant uses as an antioxidant, because most of these are, the reason that they work in our bodies is because they're already doing that in they're already doing that in plants. The pigments in plants are used to protect against the sun. That's what these pigments are for. And in the miraculous world of nature that we are a part of, how remarkable is it that we can ingest and eat these pigments that have such remarkable potency in the plants, and when then we eat them, we get a benefit as well. It's this remarkable thing about plants. But CoQ10 and vitamin C, both of which can be found in select cosmeceuticals, are very, very effective, specifically vitamin C. And you can get a reasonably high dose of vitamin C and work that into a daily regimen, and that's going to be fabulous for your skin. So let's keep moving on. Exfoliants. So there's alpha hydroxy acids, beta hydroxy acids. Now, most of the women who are on the class, and actually looking at the list, it's almost all women, which actually surprises me, because most, because most, believe it or not, when being a dermatologist, you realize very quickly that men are just as vain as women, if not more vain than women when it comes to appearance. And there's nothing, quite frankly, there's nothing vain about wanting your skin to be healthy and looking radiant. Nothing about that at all. But nonetheless, I'm a bit surprised that there's only one man on today's lecture looking at that. Okay, so we all have heard of alpha hydroxy acids, and there are many types. Now, they've been known throughout history. How have they been known? Well, I think in ancient France, the women would do, sour milk baths. There's historically, which has lactic acid. Their history of using baby's urine in various cultures, that's uric acid. There's fruit acids like malic and citric acid, which have been used historically by women and royalty to improve the texture of the skin. This is a very, very long history. Modern day, of course, glycolic acid is a very, very popular alpha hydroxy acid, which can work to reduce that outer layer of dead skin. It does have a modest promotion of collagen, that underlying skin. It can reduce fine lines. It also increases the penetration of other creams. Anytime you're going to take away a little bit of the outer barrier of your skin, that dead layer of skin, it's going to increase the penetration of other creams. A lot of people now are using derm rollers, which can also increase the penetration of various cosmeceuticals as well. That has become a pretty popular thing that I'm seeing in my patients. And alpha hydroxy acids also help with acne. Now, a lot of people ask me, because they've had friends who have had problems with, say, glycolic acid peels. Now, you can buy glycolic acid over the counter. It's a much reduced strength, but glycolic acid as a peel, you can go into the doctor's office and it provides a lot more of a removal of that area and some more boosting of collagen when there's a little bit of damage to the skin from the glycolic acid. A lot of people say, well, I don't really, I have a friend who had a bad reaction to glycolic acid. Then you can start with beta hydroxy acids, like a salicylic acid peel. A lot of the doctors will do what's called a beta peel, which is like hardly any side effects. And it's a way of trying out a chemical peel if you're interested in what that possibly could do for the health of your skin. And you become comfortable with the salicylic acid, and then you get a very mild glycolic acid peel and you see how you like it. Or you start adding glycolic acid just over the counter to your regimen. I always say with exfoliants to be careful with any kind of scrub. The reason is because, again, we don't want to rip away the dead layer of skin. That's the first thing. Secondly, if you have acne, you can actually make your acne worse by scrubbing your skin. And you're also going to damage the oil barrier of your skin as well if you're really doing a lot of scrubbing. So the best thing you can do is to come up with an alpha hydroxy acid that is, and maybe some other things that we'll talk about in the boosting collagen section next, that are going to reduce that thick. Remember, we spoke about the outer layer, the oil layer, and the dermis. And these three things that we've been speaking about, the best way to do that is, of course, not through physical means, if you can avoid it, because most people go overboard with these things. So just be careful with anything that's going to scrub physically. So we've spoken about essential fatty acids, which are going to be very important for the oil, replenishing the oil barrier, as well as ceramides for replenishing the oil barrier, both through oral means using vitamin C and nicotinamide might as well, as we spoke about it for skin cancer reduction. Now let's talk about collagen. And all of you know, because collagen has become a really runaway hit when it comes to dietary collagen. Collagen is a very, very popular supplement. And in various cultures, like Japan, as an example, the women have been eating, taking collagen supplements for many, many years. And there's been probably some of the first studies were probably out of Japan. And yes, it's true. When you eat collagen, you can get an increase in collagen production in the skin. But keep in mind that if you're a vegan and you can't have collagen, you can boost collagen through other means, through taking vitamin C, proline, and lysine. And there are supplements out there that are called collagen precursors or something like that, that are vegan formulations to help boost collagen. It's not uncommon for me to, not so uncommon for me to get the question from some of my vegan patients, because the promotion of collagen is so much out there that, well, what can I do to get the same benefits? Well, the truth is that collagen by mouth, oral collagen, whether that's marine collagen or bovine or porcine, and wherever it's coming from, again, does show some improvement, but it's not dramatic. It's not dramatic, but it is helpful. Hyaluronic acid can boost collagen as well. Ginseng has also been shown to boost collagen. And let's talk a little bit about retinol and tretinoin. So tretinoin is known as retin A, and many of you have probably heard of retin A. And these are vitamin A based derivatives. And in addition to reducing the thickness of that dry, dead skin, it also boosts collagen. And I believe is incredibly critical, along with vitamin C and ceramides in your daily. If I recommend anything, those things are important. And the best would be to use a prescription of tretinoin from your dermatologist. And I have a video on my YouTube channel about how to use tretinoin so that you don't get irritated. But the important lesson, I'm not going to go into all the details here, but the important thing is that you want to start at the lowest strength, and eventually your skin builds up a tolerance, and you want to slowly increase as your skin builds up a tolerance. Now, some people, they tried retin A or tretinoin once and they got so irritated that they're not going to do it again. There are lots of ways of using tretinoin so that you don't get irritated. And there's a video on my YouTube channel that goes into how to use tretinoin so that you don't get irritated. And I made that video because I really believe that for an anti-aging regimen, if you're not using a vitamin A based medicine like retinol is, an over-the-counter preparation. It's, probably 100 times weaker than that tretinoin, but is still worthwhile if you can't get a prescription. Nonetheless, you want to work on getting a prescription, combining that with maybe this at nighttime, vitamin C in the morning, some ceramide moisturizer. Those are some things that you want to do for sure. Polyhydroxy acids, otherwise known usually as gluconolactone and lactobionic acid, both of these you're starting to see more effects on. And in contrast to the alpha hydroxy, beta hydroxy, these polyhydroxy acids, which, as I said, you're starting to see more commonly in cosmeceuticals, they get the same benefits as alpha hydroxy acids that we spoke about, but they don't penetrate down to the deeper levels of the skin, so they don't cause as much irritation. So you're going to see more of these. As I said, you can get the same benefits, even though they don't penetrate, which makes them a valuable addition for some people. Nonetheless, I think getting a mild glycolic acid over the counter into your regime would also be good as well. And the next is, before we finish up with environmental, is to talk about peptides. Now, a peptide is basically a couple amino acids put together. And now amino acids are what are made of proteins. In our body, proteins are assembled into all kinds of things like enzymes, and they have all kinds of functions. And there is sort of a revolution going on now with peptides. And so I wanted to make a quick note about that. Now, peptides are being made for all kinds of things. And as I said, it's sort of a new generation of medication in a sense, where we're finding that certain chains of amino acids have various effects in the human body. There are people who are injecting peptides that have all kinds of effects, from various age reversal things to immune boosting to things that regulate cycles in the body. I mean, it's all over the place when it comes to the science of peptides. Now, peptides have been studied in the skin, and they can be very, very effective, and they can pretty much do anything that I've mentioned here, from having a natural exfoliant, to boosting collagen, to affecting the oil barrier of the skin. And all of these things, you can have multiple peptides put together that are going to have pretty profound effects. The downside is that most of the preparations they're easily the good ones are at least minimum of $150 for a very, very small thing. But for certain areas, like around the eyes, as an example, some of these peptides work remarkably well, and you can get rid of a lot of the lines around the eyes, as an example. But also, they can have really profound effects on the skin, but it's very, very expensive. And the downside with using topical creams for anti-aging of the skin is that you have to keep on doing it. It's not going to, you can't use Retin-A or tretinoin as an example, and then just stop using it. You'll have benefit while you're using it because you're actively adding the medicine to your skin. But once you stop, you're just going to go back to where you are. So there are many doctor-only prescribed peptides that work very, very well. And, in the dermatology forums, someone posted, their favorite, what are you guys using on your skin? And just about everyone, was incorporating one peptide cream or another into their skincare routine for anti-aging. It's just very, very costly. And, but I couldn't talk about this topic if I didn't spend a good amount of time with that. Now, if you go to an online store like dermstore.com and type in peptides, I'm sure you'll find various skin creams. They're probably all, in the $150 to $250 range. It's very, very small. It is what it is. If you have the money to do it, these prices are what they are because peptides are not the easiest things to make, and they tend to work, so they can charge a higher rate. The problem is, because peptides have that aura of mystery about them right now, they're varying levels of quality, and so you could be ripped off. So that's sort of the issue. So I didn't want to mention any brand names, but certainly you're welcome to reach out to me personally and be happy to make recommendations on that. So we're going to end tonight talking about environmental damage, ending with sun exposure and a brief talk about sunscreens and sunblocks. First of all, environmental damage, I mean anything from the outside that's going to damage your skin. We don't want to damage our skin. And please avoid toners. There's nothing valuable about a toner whatsoever, except for the fact that it's taking away skin and oil that your skin needs. There's no reason to use toners whatsoever. Avoid scrubs. We've spoken about that before. Walnut scrubs and, with all kinds of apricot seeds and all kinds of stuff out there. Avoid them. They're generally not going to be good for your body. You want to come up with a regimen that we spoke about, a topical antioxidant, a retinoid, and some kind of glycolic acid. If you just do those three things, you're going to have much better skin than most people. And then you can experiment with peptides and you can experiment with some other things. But point is, of course, as I spoke about at the beginning, you want to get your diet right. You want to get your essential fatty acids right. You want to control your blood sugar, get all that under control, and then work on this external factor. Avoid blue light. Blue light is blue light from screens, from a lot of unfortunate LED lights and such are going to have blue light. Those actually do damage your skin, unfortunately. And sun exposure, of course, is going to damage your skin. It's going to cause wrinkling. It's going to it's going to damage the collagen of your skin. It's going to promote irregular skin pigmentation. And as a final section to tonight's talk, because we're coming up on the hour, is the difference between sunblocks and sunscreens. Now, first of all, if you want to think about what these are, sunblocks work by reflecting the light off your skin. Sunscreens work by absorbing the radiation and converting it to heat. So that means that if you're wearing a sunblock, you're going to actually feel a little bit cooler because it's not working by absorbing and turning to heat. It's working by reflecting. The sunblocks are zinc oxide, titanium dioxide. Zinc oxide, old-fashioned zinc, is by far the best sunblock you're ever going to have. They are not white anymore, and they are effective. They're broad spectrum, and you want to focus on getting a zinc-based sunblock. The sunscreen ingredients are dubious at best in terms of their effects on the body, as well as environmental effects. And while there are reasons to think about using a sunscreen versus a sunblock, they're very few. You want to use a sunblock, a zinc-based sunblock. And if you are concerned at all about some of the, hormone interrupting, disrupting, endocrine disrupting chemicals that are sometimes found in various sunscreens, you can go to the Environmental Working Group, ewg.org. And on that website, you can look at their skin safe section. And you can look, because quite frankly, a lot of the cosmeceuticals that we've spoken about could potentially have stabilizers and preservatives that might not be the best for you. So if you you find a good cream and you are concerned about that, and I think it's reasonable to check, you go to ewg.org and you type it in and you see what chemicals may or may not be in there that could potentially be a problem for you. But above all, you want to use a zinc-based sunblock on areas that you're concerned about having photoaging. The merits of so I think I'll stop there basically and just focus on zinc oxide. Titanium dioxide is not as effective. You want to get zinc. And of course, there are issues that some people raise about microparticles and how maybe you're absorbing zinc into the body, then you shouldn't be doing that with certain formulations. The answer to all that is on EWG. Even though there are microparticle formulations that disappear and they're invisible zinc, there are also invisible zinc formulations that are not microparticles, and you don't have to worry about that if that's a concern of yours. So that really concludes tonight's class. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I certainly enjoy talking about skin because I've spent most of my life, more of my life than anything else, talking and thinking about skin because of my dermatology residency. And I hope everyone enjoyed it. I appreciate everyone's attention and wishing everyone a good night. I look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be talking about 5 specific things you can do to reverse aging that are all related to calorie restriction, but without having to restrict calories. And we'll talk about various plant-based chemicals, plant-based extracts that can help with that. So thank you everyone for your attention tonight. I enjoyed the class very much. And like I said, stay safe, eat well, get your rest, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks again for your attention. Good night.